Hello everyone, welcome to another TCG Talk video, and today we are back with another deck tech. This time we're going to do a new hero that I've been playing, Viserai. Viserai is a hero I've played against a decent amount, but never played myself. I've been sticking mostly to the other Runeblade hero, the new one, Briar. But with the recent chain nerf and some of the couple extra new cards that Viserai got with the Briar release in Tales of Aria, I thought he'd be a really cool hero to do for like an aggro build. I know you've seen a lot of mid-range Viserais, a lot of OTK Viserais stacking insanely high RUNECHANTS and then hitting you for a ton of damage. I thought he could put a lot of pressure on people with an aggro build. So I've been trying to, wrap my head around how I would want to do that is basically creating decently mid-level RUNECHANTS, like 5 to 10 RUNECHANTS at a time, and then attacking for 4 to 6 physical while 5 to 10 rune arcane if I can, and just keeping that pressure up, trying to race almost people a little bit, and then going from there. So as we're getting into this, I have some base level equipment that I think you need in order to make this deck work at its peak. However, you don't need the equipment that's in the main one. I have some sideboard equipment for everybody to kind of see, because not some of these equipment pieces are hard to get a hold of. So just know that you don't need the equipment that's in the main. You can use the sideboard equipment that I'll talk about, but in order for this deck to work at its peak, you need this equipment, to be honest with you. So we're going to use Viserai. His ability is after you play your first non-attack action, every Runeblade card you play that turn, you gain 1 Runechant token. So he rewards you for playing multiple Runeblade cards, essentially. We're going to use Rosetta Thorn, which is actually Briar's weapon from the Tales of Aria set. It attacks for 2. But if you've played a non-attack action and attack action that turn, then it also deals 2 arcane. So it's really annoying to block. People don't really want to spend 2 cards to block this out. And we can use it just to trigger his RUNECHANTS if we want to. It's a little bit less taxing than his Nebula Blade. If you don't use Rosetta Thorn, I would probably use Reaping Blade, and that's just kind of a sideboard weapon. You can use that against a Bolton or against a Prism, against anyone that's trying to gain life or fatigue you or sustain, because as long as they are ahead of you in life, they can't gain life. So, it's really useful for that. But most of the time we're going to be using Rosetta Thorn. For the head, I actually use Crown Dichotomy over Arcanite Skullcap. One, Skullcap's hard to get a hold to if you don't have $200 laying around to spend on the card or you haven't pulled it. But even if I had it, I would still use Crown Dichotomy. I want to be able to bring an attack and non-attack action Runeblade card back into my deck from my graveyard. Also, having 1 Arcane Barrier is really nice. And with this deck, personally, I'm not trying to defend a whole lot. I'm really not. I'm almost like not Katsu style racing, but close to it. I'm trying to hit you for a lot, block as little as humanly possible, and just race you to 0. So I'm not going to use Arcanite Skullcap as much or as effectively as other people might, like in a mid-range or an OTK Viserai. So Crown Dichotomy is what I mainly use. It also has Arcane Barrier, which is really nice. Grasp of the Arknight, there's really no substitute for this arm piece. It creates RuneChant tokens. It blocks for 3 throughout its entire life cycle. There's nothing else that does this, right? However, Grasp of the Arknight is a little hard to get a hold to. It's a pretty decent costing card. I'd say about $130 right now, a little more, a little less. If you don't have this, you're kind of just filling in whatever you think is best. For me personally, I would use Stubby Hammers. I like this because it gives basically, we have all of our attacks in this deck are 3 or less, so it's going to give all our attacks that turn not go again, but +1, which is really useful if you're trying to do like a really big pivot turn. That's what I've kind of settled on. If not, I'll use Null Rune Gloves for Arcane Barrier. Maybe if I'm playing a mirror matchup or I'm playing Briar or Chain, I'll use Null Rune Gloves sometimes just for that extra Arcane Barrier. For the chest piece, Blood Chief Skeleton is what I'm using. I want to be able to play basically 2. But what it does is the next attack action card and non-attack action card that you play this turn gains. This card costs 1 less for each RuneChant you control, which with this deck, most of the time you're going to be controlling 2+ RuneChants pretty easily, if not 3+. So basically your next 2 cards, 1 non-attack, 1 attack, are played for free, which is huge for big pivot turns, especially when you're playing a card like Dread. You're basically going to be able to play this for free or amplify the Arknight or anything like that. It also has Temper, so it's going to defend for 3 over its entire lifespan. You just don't want to get it down to 0 if you can before you use it, because it destroys when its defense is at 0. But it's really good. If you don't have this, there's, again, no real substitute for it. but some people will use either Ironweave. You're going to be playing a lot of non-attack action and attack action cards in this deck, so gaining those 2 extra resources and also blocking for 1 is a really good card as well. I like Bloodchief Skeleton more, but Ether Ironweave is good as well, so definitely a useful card. Final thing, and this is probably the most important equipment in the whole entire group, is Spellbound Creepers. There is no substitute for this. If you do legs, you can use Snapdragon Scalers to go wide, but Spellbound Creepers is what makes this deck work at its peak. It's, I think, better for Briar, but it's also extremely good for Viserai. And basically what it is you, once per turn, you put a bind counter, you pay 1 resource, and put a bind counter on Spellbound Creepers, and you may play your next non-attack action card as though we're an instant. You only can do this if you've attacked or defended this turn. And then at your end phase, you have had, in order to keep Spellbound Creepers on the field, you have had to deal the amount of arcane that there is bind counters. So let's say you've used this for the first time. If you don't deal 1 arcane by the end of that turn, it's going to go away. And then if you use it a second time and it has 2 bind counters, that means every turn now you're going to have to deal at least 2 arcane or it's going to go away. That's actually a little bit harder to do with Briar consistently, but with Viserai, it's pretty easy to do 1 or 2 arcane a turn. So as long as you keep this bind counter, maybe use it 2, maybe 3 times a game, you probably could get, I'd say, 2 or 3 uses out of it before it destroys. Maybe even 4 if you're super lucky, but probably 2 to 3, I would say, is the going rate for this. But what it allows you to do is, if you play an attack that doesn't have go again, let's say like Amplify the Arknight, and then let's say you have something like a Read the Runes still in your hand. Well, you can, if you have 1 resource floating, you can play Spellbound Creepers, put a bind counter on it, then play Read the Runes to create 3 more rune chants at the end of your turn, which is really useful. Again, this is what makes this deck go really wide or go wider. If you don't have this equipment piece, it's a little bit harder to go wide with this deck. You can use Snapdragon Scalers, but it's only going to work once, whereas this can be done 2 or 3 times. It's really useful for that. So that's the equipment. For as far as the deck, the general consensus of this deck, right, if you take anything away from this video, is we are trying to go a little wide and play attacks once or twice a turn and then create rune chants in between those attacks. And that way we're hitting for hopefully around 5, I'd say 5 to 10 ideally rune chant a turn. And if not, then we're doing like 4 to 6 at worst. So Amplify the Arknight, we have a full playset of this. It costs 1 less for each rune chant you control. 9 times out of 10, you're going to be controlling 3 or more rune chants. So you're basically able to play this for free. And at red, you're playing a 6 attack card for free, which is insane in this game. And even at blue, you're playing a 4 attack. You're still meeting that breakpoint. All of our attack actions in this set hit the breakpoint, except for Arcanic Crackle and Drawn to the Dark Dimension. Everything else meets the breakpoint of 4. So we're having a full play set of these. We're using Arcanic Crackle from the Tales of Arya set. It deals 1 arcane and it hits for 3. If you can pump this, that's even better. But at worst, it's a 0 cost attack that deals 4 total damage. Drawn to the Dark Dimension. Same with Amplify the Arknight. It costs 1 less for each rune chant you control. So if we have at least 2 rune chants, it's being played for free, and you draw a card off of it, which again is really useful for the Spellbound Creepers. Maybe you have a resource floating, no cards in hand. You draw a card, it's a non-attack action, then you play Spellbound Creepers, put a bind counter on it, and then play that last card to probably get a couple extra rune chants, which is really useful. Next, we're going to be using full play set of Marvian Skies. This is just to create rune chants and to give our attacks go again. When you play this card, your next rune blade attack automatically has go again, no matter what. And if it hits, it creates that many rune chant tokens. At red, it creates 3, yellow 2, and blue 1. So full play set of these. These are ideal to help us go wide. They're ideal to make rune chant tokens. They're ideal to make more rune chant tokens for just playing the card with Viserai's ability. It's just an amazing card to have in this kind of composition. Next, we're going to be using Meet and Greet. If it hits, it creates a rune chant token. It's at that 4 breakpoint, which is good. And if you've dealt arcane damage this turn, it gains go again. Now, Meet and Greet also procs off itself. So if Meet and Greet is dealing the arcane damage, like if you do arcane damage with your rune chants from playing Meet and Greet attack, right? Maybe you have like 5 rune chant tokens and you play Meet and Greet, so it deals 5 arcane and they don't block it. Meet and Greet's going to gain go again. It procs off its own attack, so it's really useful for that. Mordred Tide is our pivot turn card. Basically, it creates, whenever you create a rune chant token that turn, it creates that many +1, which is really important because Viserai's ability, right, is after your first non-attack action, which is Mordred, every Runeblade card you play gains a Runechant token. Now, if you play Mordred, every Runeblade card you play after that is going to get you 2 Runechant tokens. And then if you get a hit with Marvian Skies, it's instead of creating 3 at red, it's going to create 4. Read the runes. Instead of creating 3 Runechant tokens, it's going to create 4. So you can see how that snowballs really heavily. If you use this perfectly with a Dread Tribute, it can create up to like 6 to 8 Runechant tokens if the card works to its fullest extent. So Mordred's huge. I'll use Crowd Economy to go back and get it again, even after I've used all 3. This is your pivot turn card. You want to use this as much as you can. Just keep using it. For Oath of the Arknight, I use this for pump. Obviously, it creates its own Runechant token and it pumps your attacks. It's really good for like an Arcane Crackle or Drawn to the Dark Dimension. If you can play maybe this at red, gives +3, and then you play Drawn to the Dark Dimension because you have 2 Runechant tokens for free. Now all of a sudden, Drawn to Dark Dimension is hitting for 6, which is a lot better, right? And you're drawing that card. So it's really useful in that regard, just for pumping stuff. Read the Runes, pretty self-explanatory. Ideally, what I want to use this card for is I play an attack, I activate my Spellbound Creepers, and then I play Read the Runes at instant speed to give me 3 Runechants going into my next turn, which can set up your next turn even better, right? Same thing with Plunder Run. If I can't play this out of Arsenal, I'm going to try to play it at instant speed to get off my second attack. Cards like this you're wanting to use Spellbound Creepers with to really, make your attacks go wider or to get some good effects at the end of your turn. Rune Flash is really good. Same as Amplify the Dark Knight, same as Draw the Dimension. You can kind of see a trend here. Every Runechant you control will cost 1 less to play the card, and it has Go Again. So if you have 3 Runechants, you're playing a 0 cost 4 attack card with Go Again, and that's just awesome, right? It's similar to like a Katsu, basically. So this is a really good card. Singeing Steel Blades, one from the Tales of Aria set, 4 damage, 1 arcane, 1 cost, pretty straightforward. Same thing with Spellblade Strike, except it creates Runechant tokens. So these two are kind of like your standard attack cards. Then you have Sting of Sorcery, which I took from this Tales of Aria set. It's a Runeblade action, and it basically gives me an extra instance of Arcane per attack that turn. And it's really good to set up with Mordred because you're going to get 2 Runechants just off of playing this card after Mordred. And then it's going to give your attacks just a little bit more of a buff, which is really good. Become the Arknight is kind of like your hand resetter, right? Like if you draw up this card and then you draw 3 attack actions, you can discard an attack action to go get a non-attack action. It's a 0 cost and it starts, your Viserai trigger, at least the first half of it. So it's a really good card to kind of like fix your hand, so to speak. It's just really good. It's a Viserai specialization card. Then Dread Trip. You're trying to use this ideally with Mordred. Even more ideally, if you can pop Bloodchief Skeleton, making this card be played for free. You pop Bloodchief Skeleton, you play Mordred, or you play Mordred, you pop Bloodchief Skeleton, then you play this for free, and then play something else at instant speed maybe for free, and it's just really good for creating a lot of Runechant tokens. It's really useful in that regard. So this is another kind of pivot turn card. Then finally, we have Tome of the Arknight. Tome of the Arknight's really good. It's a little bit of a gamble, right? You reveal the top 2 cards of your deck. If it's an attack action, non-attack action, then you put them in your hand. If not, they go back on top of your deck. With this deck, I'm running 30 attack actions and 31 non-attack actions. So it's a 50-50 chance, right? Pretty much if I can get this. And if you don't get it, at least you kind of got like an opt. You kind of see what's coming up in your hand. And you can kind of, let's say a worst case scenario, you look at 2 attacks and you're like, okay, based off what I see that I'm about to draw up, how should I play this turn? So at the very least, it's kind of like a little opt function. And it starts your Viserai trigger for playing your first non-attack action. And then you can play a Runeblade action after it and get that Runechant. So this is the deck. Again, it's about creating mid-size Runechant tokens. And then, hitting your opponent constantly for a lot of arcane damage, trying to go a little bit wide, maybe hit them multiple attacks a turn, and really putting the pressure on your opponent. I try not to block as much as I can when I'm using this, but you kind of have to block it a little bit every now and then. But overall, if you can honestly, if they don't have a lot of arcane barrier, which a lot of people aren't running right now in this meta, you can race a lot of different opponents with this deck pretty well. On sideboard, I just have 6 right now. They're defense reactions, reduce the Runechant or Sigil of Suffering. You kind of take your pick on which one you like better. but you might want to put this in maybe if you're playing a tall, a tall deck that's going to hit you really hard. You can, put this in. These don't go to your win condition as much. Reduce the rune chant kind of does a little bit better. Honestly, I would probably take the plunder runs out and put reduce the rune chant in. That way I have all rune blink cards. But it's up to you. Sideboard's still trying to figure that out right now on how I want to sideboard depending on what the meta is. But that's the basis of the deck. I played it today. I played about 7 games with it. Yeah, about 6 or 7. I won pretty much half of them. And for someone who's never played Viserai, it was pretty good. I'm gonna keep working on the deck, and I don't even have Grasp of the Arknight, by the way. I just have these 3, and then I'm using Stubby Hammers, so I don't even have the full experience of the deck. But so I'm gonna get this soon. But even with me being new to Viserai, it's pretty easy to understand. You just gotta make sure you do your rune chant triggers properly. But let me know what you think about the deck. What would you add or take away? What do you think of the deck overall? Do you think it's potent? I think it's pretty good. I think it's going to do well. But yeah, let me know your thoughts. If you want to leave a comment, like, and subscribe, please do. If not, go to another Flesh and Blood creator, big or small, and like and subscribe their stuff, comment on their stuff. And so we can get more people seeing this game and really try to enjoy it. But thank you all so much for tuning into the video. I hope you all have a great day, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you guys so much.